Over the last week or so, we've been looking back on all that 2021 had to offer musically. But today, it is time to tackle the biggest video of the year. It is time for my top 10 country albums of 2021. On the whole, I think 2021 was a pretty up and down ride for country music, but I think that should have been expected given the fact nobody really knew what this year was going to look like as we began to move out of the pandemic and everything. However, amidst all the drama and chaos that took place, 2021 still delivered some incredible records, and today it is time to highlight those. It's always interesting to look back on the year as a whole because over time, some albums have grown on me, others have shrunk, but this is how it all panned out in the end. Before we jump in, a quick disclaimer, obviously this is just my opinion. There's no correct list, these are just the 10 albums I found myself enjoying the most. When creating this list, I tried to find a balance between objective quality and subjective enjoyment. The point I'm trying to make is don't hate me if your favorite album didn't get featured on this list, but rather I'd really encourage you to let me know what your top 10 was in the comments below. Other than that, let's not waste any more time, and kicking us off at the number 10 spot, I have the chief himself, Eric Church, and his Heart and Soul collection.
Go on, take her hand, heart, and draw.
I know technically they're all separate albums, but I'm counting them as one towards this list because it's impossible to choose just one album from this collection, and they all need to be discussed. The whole project was recorded up in the mountains of Carolina, and it is easily Eric's most experimental work to date. He ventures into multiple genres, some more uncommon song structures, more dramatic builds and arrangements. It's all incredibly intricate, incredibly powerful, and incredibly good. I'd say on the whole, I think Heart is a lot more consistent. It's more what we've come to expect from Eric, but just with a little more juice, a little more oomph on the back end. Like the track Heart of the Night, which has one of the most hectic but satisfying climaxes in country music this year. However, Heart is also home to some brilliantly written tracks like Crazy Land and Russian Roulette, both of which feature more expected and predictable instrumentals, but where they don't have the extra juice in the instrumental side is made up for in the lyrics, Russian Roulette being one of the most clever concepts to come from this year. I had some high praise for it in my top country songs of 2021, and then Crazy Land is just a black hole of wordplay and hidden details. It's a lyric nerd's dream, so although I prefer Heart, I had to include the collection as a whole because Soul provides too many talking points to not be featured. Where Heart is the more straightforward Eric Church album, he uses soul almost as a bowl of experimentation. He's really just trying a little bit of everything, and while it does lead to some airballs, it leads to just as many full court buzzer beaters like the irresistibly fun Where I Wanna Be, the soul-inspired alt-rock funk cut Look Good and You Know It, which has these epic background vocals, and I mean, come on, Soul has hell of a view, so how could I not find a way to sneak it in? Coming into the number 9 spot, I've got the debut self-titled album from Triston Marez.
Yeah, that jukebox plays.
Triston Marez is a relatively new guy in the Texas country scene. He's been kicking about releasing singles and the odd EP over the last several years, but 2021 was his big breakout year, and man did he make the most of it with this awesome self-titled LP. This record just has such a fresh and new sound to it in a really good way. It's Texas country for sure, but he finds ways to sneak in some extra colors and musical hues that really help separate it from the pack. Instrumentally, it's locked and loaded with fiddle and steel, as well as some twinkling classical guitars and a groovy accordion on the 7th track Texas Swing. The songwriting definitely holds its own as well. There's lots of lyrical standouts like She's Had Enough of Texas, which is jam-packed with loads of super fun imagery. I also really enjoyed the love story featured in the 4th track, Two Beers on the Bar, but my favorite song writing-wise has to be the 2nd track, Day Drinkin'. It's a super dumb song about, you could probably guess, drinking, but it's the way the chorus flows from one line to another. The wordplay is super fun and catchy, and it gets stuck in your head, which I think is one of the strongest traits this album has. These songs are not only super strong, but they're super catchy and memorable. I probably had every one of these songs stuck in my head at any given time, but the one melody that keeps coming back to me more than any other would have to be his collaboration with Ronnie Dunn, Where the Neon Lies. Overall, this LP is just a super enjoyable listen, highlighting all the best Texas country has to offer, and if you're not on the Triston Marez bandwagon, now is the time to hop on. For the number 8 spot, we're staying in Texas. It's the new Parker McCollum album, Gold Chain Cowboy.
So why are you always angry? Why?
Gold Chain Cowboy had a pretty interesting journey to this list. I found Parker a few years ago via his 2017 album Probably Wrong that regular viewers of the channel are probably sick of me praising whenever I can. But from there, he was sort of on and off, releasing singles here and there, an EP near the end of 2020, but when singles started coming out for this album, I just wasn't feeling it. Parker recently signed to a major label, and I guess I was worried what may happen to his music given how marketable he is, and I think in turn I overreacted to some of the pre-releases, but once I got the full thing, I ended up enjoying this a lot more than I was prepared to. And as time passed and I continued listening, this record just grew and grew and grew on me. And now here I am featuring it on my top 10 albums of the year. And while the singles have grown on me substantially, I truly think it's the deeper cuts where this album shines the brightest. They're not anything incredibly risky or out there, it's just Parker playing to his strengths, but they come together so well, mainly leaning on themes of self-doubt and Parker just basking in his sadness, but I think it makes for some incredible music, like the track Falling Apart, which is Parker saying while this girl was falling in love with him, he was falling apart and it just led to disaster in the end. Why Indiana is another one of my favorites with the driving tempo as Parker sings to this girl saying, why'd you have to dump me while I was in Indiana, where there's nothing to distract myself with. Had you dumped me in a place like Vegas, I could have gone to a casino and forgotten about it, but in Indiana, there's nothing to do but think about this girl. I think the sleeper of the album is Heart Like Mine, which is one of the most interesting twists on a breakup. It's Parker saying how he recognized this girl had the only heart like his, she was the perfect match, but for some reason he just couldn't fall in love. There's one line in the chorus that always makes me pause and think, I'd tell you that I love you forever, but I hate the way you look when I lie. Parker just has such a knack for articulating and transforming incredibly complex emotions into easily followable songs that have more than meets the eye. I love it, I love Parker McCollum, and I can't wait to see where he goes next. Flying in at the 7th spot, I've got Sturgill Simpson's narrative record, The Ballad of Dude and Juanita.
Hot on the bandit's trail, fence posting through the snow.
Sturgill Simpson hit us with what is believed to be the final installment in his solo career, and boy did he ever deliver with this short but incredibly detailed and well-structured bluegrass record that follows the characters Dude and Juanita from front to back. The record begins with Juanita being kidnapped, and the rest of the album is Dude's undeterred journey to get her back. It's always a treat to get a concept album, but it's super rare to get a narrative album like this one here, and that only makes it all the more special. It reads like a play or a musical, it's dramatic, the instrumentals do a great job of playing as a song, but also fitting the mood like it's atmospheric music in the back of a film. Sturgill's just such a creative guy that it's always a treat when he releases anything, because you can always listen back and find another little detail or draw another connection that you didn't notice the previous time through. And if this is truly the final solo record from Sturgill, then he sent it out on a high note, and more power to him. Next up, coming in at number 6, I have the Marfa tapes from Miranda Lambert, John Randall, and Jack Ingram.
If you ever get time to step down Texas.
Man, where to begin on the Marfa tapes? It's just such a cool project that I guess I wasn't expecting from someone as big as Miranda. The album is named after Marfa, Texas, which the trio described as their escape, where they would just pack it up, drive down to Marfa, and write songs. But this time they decided to record the songs right then and there. The whole album is one acoustic guitar and 3 voices being picked up by 2 microphones beside a campfire, and it just feels so tranquil, like you're sitting around the fire with them. The album is 15 tracks, which also includes acoustic versions of Tequila Does from her Wildcard album in 2020, as well as a new version of the fan favorite Tin Man from her 2016 double album, The Weight of These Wings, both of which were originally written in Marfa when they would go away for these little songwriting retreats. There's just something so pure and lucid about these tracks, and it's such a perfect balance of slower, more reflective songs, contrasted by these fun sing-along jams. On the slower side, you've got songs like the gorgeous 3rd track, The Wind's Just Gonna Blow, which was originally written after Miranda's divorce from Blake Shelton. You can also look to songs like Waxahachie, which is the earworm of the album, as well as other moments like Ghost or Breaking a Heart, which is this super short and sweet longing ballad about seeing a breakup from both sides and wondering which side is worse, being heartbroken or breaking a heart. But as I mentioned, it is perfectly balanced by the more upbeat foot stompers like Homegrown Tomatoes, 2 Step Down to Texas, which is one of my favorites, as well as what would appear to be the fan favorite of the album, the 9th track, Geraldine, all of which perfectly show off the playfulness and authenticity that this record is built on. It's flooded with harmonies, whether they be tight and pretty like on Waxahachie, or just fun and experimental like on 2 Step Down to Texas, where you've got one poorly attempting to whistle, while the other's just hollering lines back to Miranda as she tries to focus on her part. I could go on and on and on, and in fact I already have, but the Marfa tapes, they're brilliant. And with that, we have officially made it to the halfway mark of this list, and at the number 5 spot, I have an album I'm sure a lot of you have been waiting for. It belongs to the record with the most sales across all genres this year. It is Dangerous by Morgan Wallen.
This truck will get the prettiest girl in town.
2021, as it relates to country music, will forever be the year of Morgan Wallen. Nobody made anywhere close to as much noise as Morgan, whether that was for good or bad reasons, but one thing's for sure, and that's the fact that he put out a darn impressive body of work. Obviously, 2021 was the year of double albums, and though I'm not the biggest fan of the ridiculous amount of double albums we've been getting, I give Morgan the pass simply because he was the first to do it. Not that he was the first person to ever put out a double album, but he kind of started this trend we've been seeing lately. Now, technically, he's the obvious one to blame for this anarchy, but again, he was first to it, it's not his fault. Given that this album is 32 tracks including the bonuses, it's obvious there are some duds or filler tracks, but there were so many highlights and incredible moments on this thing that it'd be rude to put more weight on the bad ones than the good ones, because the best moments far outweigh the worst. I mean, the amount of showstoppers on this thing is crazy. Sand in My Boots, Somebody's Problem, 865, Neon Eyes, Wonder About the Wind, Cover Me Up, 7 Summers, More Than My Hometown, Rednecks, Red Letters, Red Dirt, Me on Whiskey, Need a Boat, Silverado for Sale, Living the Dream, Quitting Time, This Side of a Dust Cloud, all on the same album? Are you kidding me? These are future certified hood classics, and some already are. It would be criminal of me to exclude Dangerous from this list, especially given Morgan's mainstream appeal. I think there's a lot of quality writing and instrumentals being put on the biggest display. Granted, I say that as it's rumored he's going to push Wasted on You as the next single, but I still just think this was an incredibly important record this year, and it was equally fantastic. We're getting close now, and coming in at the number 4 spot, I have the most recent entry on this list. It's the sophomore album from none other than Charles Wesley Godwin, How the Mighty Fall.
I'm like a bull to the slaughter, fish out of water every time.
Gosh, this is good. This is one of those records that I get physically passionate about when discussing it. But how can I not? It's one of the prettiest, smoothest bodies of work to come out this year. He released it at the perfect time, right at the peak of fall, and that's what this album is. Not only are the promotional images all set during the autumn season, but it just feels like autumn. It's so warm and pretty on the surface, but the deeper you go, the colder and more intimate this record gets. Coming off of his stellar 2019 debut album, Seneca, I figured it would be hard for Charles to top that with his next release, and though I'm still on the fence, he may have topped Seneca with this new one, How the Mighty Fall. This record sees Charles take full advantage of some much cleaner production. Seneca was more rough around the edges, which granted fit the album perfectly, but when we're talking How the Mighty Fall, he needed to tighten a few things up, polish some corners, and that's exactly what he did. Instrumentally, this record feels very full, with plenty of fiddles, shimmering acoustic guitars, and pristine pianos. It's all very acoustic, which helps evoke this feeling of a cool autumn breeze. Vocally, Charles went for a lot more ambitious melodies, and it paid off in big ways, like the track Needle Fall Down, which is my favorite. As I mentioned though, I think the talking point is the improved production and instrumental arrangements. With this record, he no longer has to rely on his writing and delivery alone to help pull at your heartstrings. And though he still does, he now has more parts pulling harder on those heartstrings, which just leads to some of the most moving pieces of music this year, like the title track, Temporary Town, or one of the songwriting highlights, Jesse, which apparently was inspired by some spray paint he saw on a wall while out for a run. Cool story. You already know what time it is. It is podium time. We have reached my top 3 country music albums of 2021, but first, it is time to look back at some honorable mentions, the albums that didn't make my final list but are still very worthy of a shout out. First up would have to be Thomas Rhett's Country Again Side A, which saw Thomas venture back to his acoustic roots with some incredibly wholesome and worthwhile tunes about his family and where he's at in life, both physically and religiously. Despite having a dud or two, this thing is simple and compelling, and a great return to form for Thomas. Next up would be Cole Chaney's Mercy. I was a little late to the Cole Chaney party, only getting around to him near the end of November, but I definitely think this record, Mercy, shows a lot of potential. Brian Kelley officially started his solo career and really set himself a solid foundation to build off of. While his debut album, Sunshine State of Mind, may not be the deepest listen of 2021, it's definitely one of the most engaging and relaxing, and I think he's opened a lot of doors for himself. Lastly, technically it's only an EP, but I just have to shout out The Last Resort from Midland. Granted, they also put out The Sonic Ranch earlier this year, but those were old recordings, so I wasn't sure how to judge that in the context of this list. But regardless, I thought The Last Resort was tight and condensed. I think they went 5 for 5 on the track list, and it features arguably some of the group's best tracks to date. Yeah, incredible project. Alright, now we can officially step onto the podium, and snatching up the bronze medal this year, I have the brilliant Carly Pearce and her album 29 Written in Stone. If you want emotionally compelling songwriting, incredible interpretations of modern bluegrass music, if you want sass, if you want swagger, if you want a front-to-back badass record, look no further than Carly Pearce's 29 Written in Stone. If you can remember back to the start of the year, in February, Carly Pearce dropped this super short, to-the-point, focused 7-track album centered around her divorce from fellow country star Michael Ray, and the mixed bag of emotions that came with that. It was such a high-quality, to-the-point album with no fat on it. I was actually concerned when she announced during the summer she was going to be expanding 29 into the entire album, 29 written in stone. I was just concerned that the additions would be unnecessary and like they would take away from the impact the original project had, almost like the additional tracks would soften the blunt and honest nature in which the original collection hit you, but then the full record came out and it just wasn't the case. 29 Written in Stone just does such a great job at exploring all avenues found within a divorce. It's got loads of sadder, reflective, introspective moments like the title track 29, which is all about how at age 29, society expects you to be at this certain stage in life, beginning to settle down, paying mortgage instead of rent, just generally having all your ducks in a row. But Carly comes and says that's just not the case. 29 was the year I got married and divorced, went from a miss to a missus and then the other way around. It's the willingness to be as vulnerable as she is on these tracks that allows them to have such an impact, the courage to let everyone in on how messy her life has become. But what this record does so well is balance that with some epic, sassy moments. Other divorce records from this year like Adele and Casey Musgraves focus a lot more on self-worth and trying to find light at the end of the tunnel, and while Carly does go through those emotions on several tracks, what really separates this record from the pack in my opinion is the more cocky, backhanded moving on tracks. There's such a unique villainous energy about some of these songs that is super easy to get behind, like Next Girl, You're Drinking My Problem, or my personal favorite from the record, as you guys already know, Diamondback. It's just such a one-of-a-kind record that could not have been executed any better. Silver medal time, coming in as my second favorite country album of 2021. It is Human by Cody Johnson.
If you got a chance, take it.
Where do I even begin? What is left to be said about this new record from Cody? Cody is one of those guys that as soon as you think he can't top his last project, he does. And it's not that he's throwing anything particularly new at us. It's roughly the same length, it's the same instrumental palette, similar lyrical concepts. It's just each time around he slightly improves and refines it, and he's been slowly but surely perfecting this sound for over a decade, but I just never get bored of it because the music is so undeniably remarkable. The fact of the matter is, Cody Johnson just doesn't make bad songs, but it's not only that, it's that he made 18 incredible songs. Sure, there's standouts that not every track here can necessarily compete with, but everything about this record is executed at such a high level, it's impossible to hate on it. Writing-wise, even though Cody doesn't write a lot of his songs, he's got an ear for what works, an ear for what fits, and that ear did not let him down in the slightest on this record. Human is built around the human experience. It touches on just about every aspect of the human life, which sounds super vague, and though you could easily argue it is, it just works. I don't know what it is about Cody Johnson's music, but he manages to keep me coming back and loving his output more and more each and every time. I just don't have any bad things to say about this record. There's no moments or tracks I can single out and say, I didn't really like that part. The instrumentals are colorful and textured and incredibly fine-tuned. Cody's vocals somehow get better with each and every record he puts out. The delivery is more emotional. The belting is more emphatic and grand. The melodies are more daring. His God-given runs are also on full display all over this thing. Songwriting-wise, these cuts are relatable, they're fun, they're gut-wrenching, they're clever. They're everything you could ask for from a record in this vein. I'm just left dumbfounded. I want to sit here and say Cody's finally hit the ceiling with this style, but knowing him, come 2023 or 2024, he'll drop another record that somehow improves upon this one. But for now, we're here in the present and we're focused on Human, which has rightfully earned its spot as my second favorite country album of 2021. And with that, we can move on to my number one pick, the gold medal, the highest honor I can bestow, my favorite country music album of 2021. It was never up for debate. It is Morgan Wade and her debut album, Reckless.
You only used to smoke when you drank.
You know, oddly enough, I never really have a hard time choosing my album of the year. It's never a toss-up or anything, because there always seems to be one record that just naturally separates itself as a class above, and this year is no different. Reckless just had Album of the Year written all over it from the day I first heard it, and if you've been around the channel for a bit, you'll know I was actually quite late getting to this record. I saw people talking about it when it first dropped back at the end of March, but amidst the chaos of release season, I never got a chance to check it out until I saw a post about it in June, which reminded me to go back and check it, and look, If I feel so passionately about an album that I still review it several months after it was released, you know there's something in the water. Reckless is just such a beautiful expression of vulnerability. Over the course of this album, we're introduced to every side of Morgan's personality. The good, the bad, and the ugly is all on full display, and it's engaging, it's interesting, it's substantive and authentic. Morgan's songwriting is very conversational and poetic, and it just makes you feel like you're in the moment with her, almost like you're a bystander to all these situations she's singing about. But above that, I just don't think the production could have been better. From front to back, this thing is packed to the brim with experimental fusions of alternative rock, country, folk, pop, and it all comes together so seamlessly. This wide range of sounds and influences all just come together like puzzle pieces to create an incredibly cohesive sonic direction, whether it be the alt-rock banger Wilder Days, the incredibly poppy Last Cigarette, or the eerie atmospheric indie folk cut Northern Air. Wherever Morgan goes, remarkable amounts of success follows. The pacing of this record is phenomenal. At 10 tracks and 39 minutes, this album provides a direct, intentional, and impactful listen with zero fat, and overall just an incredibly refined and disciplined album, which is so rare from debuts. More often than not, debut albums are scattered, aimless, and bloated, with the artist trying their hand at a multitude of sounds, seeing what sticks. But that's just not the case with Reckless. Over the course of 10 tracks, Morgan was able to establish her own sound and general style, and has just laid a ridiculous foundation for herself to build off of. It's just a brilliant record in every way. I'm so glad to see she's been getting the recognition and appreciation she deserves. And yeah, Morgan Wade's Reckless takes home my 2021 Country Album of the Year. Oh my gosh. All right. And with that, we have finally reached the end of my album list. Those were my top 10 favorite country albums of 2021. Be sure to comment your favorites of this year down below. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you dropped a like. It really does help the channel out a lot. If you're new, maybe consider subscribing for more country music content. I'm super stoked coming into this new year, even if I have a broken hand and now an injured foot. Still grinding out as much content as I possibly can for you guys. Links to my Instagram, Discord, and podcast are all down below in the description. And until next time, I hope all of you have a fantastic day.